Ep.6.
Mic check, mic check.
Salutations.
1 1 1 1 2 1 2.
Yo, what's up, world? Welcome to another episode of the 206. Before I get started and tell you guys what today's episode is going to be about, I want to make a promise. I want to make a guarantee because I know we have mentioned this in so many of our previous episodes, but the religion and spirituality conversation is coming. It will be the next episode after this, no matter what. We're having some technological issues. The techno gods were not working in our favor, but Jason has sacrificed 2 inches of his golden locks. Tim has been doing ring dances in his room, and I have been offering up my ardent prayers to the gods so they can allow the technology to work when we record the religion and spirituality episode for the uptime time. Now we think we figured it out. The last few recordings we've done have been working. I think we just had a bit of fatigue from having that conversation so many times. So we decided to talk about today's episode first prior to doing that. But I just want to let you guys know for sure, because we mentioned it so much, and it'll help you guys understand a lot of the ways in which we think that religion and spirituality conversation is coming. With that being said, as far as today is concerned, we're going to be talking about, I guess when it boils down to it, cheating and our perceptions of what cheating is and is not, and the insight you can gain from this hypothetical scenario that we're going to offer up to you guys and discuss amongst ourselves. So the title of this episode, I believe, is going to be Option A or Option B, because we're going to present 2 options for you guys to think about, and we're going to discuss, neither of which anybody wants. It's kind of like the lesser of 2 evils. But again, we think it gives you insight into the way we perceive things when it comes to the nature of cheating and companionship within relationships. So I'll give a bit of background information as to how this hypothetical scenario even came to be. I don't remember all the exact details. I just recall this had to be, at bare minimum, what are we in, 2020? Yeah, how can I forget? It's definitely 2020. Everyone knows what year we're in. But this had to be at least 8 years ago, bare minimum. And there was a bunch of people over my house, and Tim was one of them. And I just remember, I don't know again how it started, but I just remember that, it was one of those things where like there was a bunch of people over my house. There's some people in the garage, some people in the living room, some people upstairs, whatever, right? And everyone, I think 90% of the people in the house gathered into the living room, and there was like at least 20 to 25 people. And I think it might have just started because people were talking about this, and then it just grew. But basically, we had people like were divided. It was like, it was like most people on one side of the room and against a few of us on another. And the conversation and the theoretical conversation goes as follows. So you have to choose between these 2 options. Which one would you prefer if you were in a relationship? Okay. So you are in a relationship. Okay. Let's say you're home, you're doing whatever, and your boyfriend or girlfriend calls you and says, hey, can I come over? I have something I want to talk to you about. And you say, sure, whatever. I'm not doing anything. Come over whenever you like, right? So you continue doing whatever task you're doing, and then your boyfriend or girlfriend comes over, and they say, hey, you greet them, say, what's up, baby, whatever, give them a kiss, and they sit you down, over on the couch or the bed, wherever the hell you are inside of this theoretical house. And this
What
is how it
color are
goes.
the drapes over there?
If it's my house, the drapes, they are a sleek black. I don't know. Anyway, so this is it. So they sit you down, and you can already tell by their demeanor that this is something serious. You're not about to like receive any like pleasant news. You can kind of just infer by the way, by the mood and the atmosphere of the room. So they sit you down and they say, hey, baby, everyone's gonna be baby because, I don't feel like thinking about a boy named and a girl named depending upon who you are as you're listening. So they say, hey, baby, listen. So, I'm telling you this because I always wanted to be transparent and honest with you. That's something that we talked about when we first got together, that no matter what, we'll be transparent and honest with each other. So that's why I'm telling you this now. So here we go. This is where the difference comes in. So you either have to choose option A or option B. So option A is as follows. They pretty much tell you that they were at a party, let's say it was a friend's house, whatever, and they ended up hooking up with a random person who they had not known before. It's a person they met for the first time in their life. They saw them at the party, and they ended up hooking up with them. Now, this was also a point of contention because it changed people's answer depending upon what the definition of hooking up meant. How far did they go physically? We can get into the details of that later on, but for right now, whatever hooking up means to you, that's what the partner describes to you. And again, to be clear, it was someone they did not know. Circumstances just happened to where they weren't necessarily going into the place thinking they were cheating. Let's just say that, they were dancing, that person started dancing with them, and then one thing led to another, they went off and did their thing, okay? So that's option A. So would you have to have that happen to you, or option B? Same thing. They sit you down, holding the hand, looking in your eyes, and telling you the story, telling you they wanted to be honest with you. And option B is that they had to be around somebody else circumstantially. Let's say a new neighbor moved in, or they were in college and they were a TA, and there was some student they had to tutor. The point is, they didn't go out of their way to make contact with this friend. Whatever it is that they circumstantially had to be around this person. Okay, and not because through circumstances they were kind of forced to be around this person with some level of frequency, right? And then they tell you that they started to realize that they developed feelings for this person. They said nothing happened physically whatsoever, and you take them for their word, and they're being honest. Nothing happened physically whatsoever. They just began to notice that they started to develop feelings for this person, and they started to like this person, and now they're telling you simply because they felt like they, again, wanted to be honest and transparent with you, and that it was enough of and strong enough of feelings that they wanted to tell you. So you, as a listener, have to choose option A or option B. Now, I think Tim's gonna go ahead and go first on this one, but I'll give you guys a bit of a. I mean, I guess it's not a spoiler because you guys weren't privy to this conversation, anyways. But basically, what happened is that most people that were at this party, they chose option A. Everyone, and the reason for the most people choosing option A, they say, yeah, obviously, clearly both suck. No one wants either of these options to happen. But most people chose option A because they said that option B hurt more. And the funny thing was that I agreed with everyone who chose option A, that option B, in a sense, on the surface, hurt more. But that's exactly why I chose option B. And I'll get a bit into more of my psychology behind that when it's my turn. But I'll go ahead and pass the rock over to Tim because he's going to go first with answering this hypothetical question for himself.
I was thinking about it. Why don't you go ahead? Because this is the brainchild of yours that you brought up. And you brought up this hypothetical several times. So please be my guest.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm like the creator and the originator of this hypothetical. To be honest, I would not be surprised if I was. I'm just saying I don't have any particular memory of coming up with this hypothetical. If anyone knows me, I love hypothetical questions and I come up with them all the time. Just because they usually are a great conduit into some interesting conversations. But with that being, and it was clear because every time I bring this up, it sparks a huge conversation between people. So yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and just get a bit into why I choose this. So for myself, this is kind of how I roll. All right, this is why I choose option B. Option A is like this. For me, when I'm in a relationship or just my life view in general, I always say that emotional reality supersedes physical ones and spiritual reality supersede material ones. Basically, what I'm saying, I think that like internal forces are always stronger than external forces. And if internal forces are strong, they can always protect you and influence you more so than an external force, right? So in regard to the physical thing, most people say usually if someone cheats, it's a sign of something, right? And I agree with that to a point. But for me, it boils down to this. I've been in plenty of relationships, and let's just say, in a literal sense, I've had plenty of opportunities and chances to cheat on a partner. And, when I'm in a relationship, it's not like my physiology turns off and I'm not attracted to anyone or anything, right? But at the same time, when I am in a relationship, the bond and the loyalty that I have to my partner is so strong that these things don't really even register to me at all. Or if something does register, the thought of acting on that inclination or acting on that feeling is so easily deflected and dismissed that it's nothing. It's not even something to like for me to even think about or give it a second thought to. And I say that is because the nature of the bond that I have with my partner is so strong and so much more profound than whatever surface level influence may be coming my way, that to me it's evidence and symbolic of the strength and the strength of the bond that I have with the other person, and that the bond is built off of all the fundamental things relationships need to be built off on, to protect yourself from external influences. So in this case, if my partner was to do this to me, again, I'm not someone, again, I, the way I would react is, I mean, I genuinely like to think, and then through reflection, I act mature in all these type of situations. I've technically been cheated on before. It was an option A type thing, and I was young too. I was 15, and I won't get into how I handle that situation, or maybe I will later on in the podcast. But basically, to me, the act of them cheating, and doing this physical thing with this random person, to me, personally, it will be evidence to the fact that the bond that I thought we had, or at least from their side of it, wasn't as strong as I thought it was. Because if it was, if they were feeling the way that I was feeling, then the nature of our bond would have such a hold on them that they'd be able to resist that influence. And the fact that they weren't, to me, means that their understanding and their connection to what was growing between us wasn't strong enough. Because if it was, they wouldn't have given into this this physical desire. And again, I'm always someone who does say that physical desires really are just a manifestation of emotional ones, or spiritual ones. They're always a manifestation of something deeper. I don't think physical things within themselves are, I mean, outside of there is obviously very primitive and evolutionary instincts from a physical perspective. But when you're in a relationship, okay, or the desire to act on physical things with other people, to me, they're always symbolic of something deeper or something else. It's not just strictly physical ever for me. That's just how I think about it, right? So to me, it's like whatever is happening to us internally and emotionally and spiritually isn't that deep for the other person, because if it was, they would be able to, off of deference to that bond, either deference out of respect, or because the nature of the bond is so strong where the other influence isn't even strong enough to influence them, then it wouldn't happen. So it's kind of two things. It's either the influence is strong, but because of the nature of our relationship, they're able to have loyalty to it, or the influence of our relationship is so strong that the other influences doesn't even register as something that can compare, so they have no desire to do it anyways, right? So to me, it's like neither of those two things were present. So for me, it's just kind of like, oh, well, what I thought was happening here isn't really happening. And then as far as, oh, how would you go about, would you break up with the person and all that stuff? I'm always one who, I'm always conversation first, unless, because someone, they do something like, even if I am going to break up with them, I kind of made up my mind, I'm still going to have a conversation about it, right? Because I'm not just like, oh, well, F you, you cheat on me, bye, right? Like, I still care about the person, even if they did cheat on me. So, because again, it didn't change how I felt, just because it wasn't like that for them doesn't mean that it wasn't like that for me. So I'm still going to honor that bond in that way. And part of that is always communication and seeing, what's going on with my partner. And clearly there is something going on if this is what you chose to do. So I'm going to have a conversation with them about it. But I think, more times than not, it probably does end up with me breaking up with them. But hey, and the only time I was tested, and again, I was young, so, be it what it is. But I was 15 and she did, and I was like, we stayed together. So there's that. And then, so yeah, if it was the other option, this is kind of how I feel about it. And this is what kind of, I guess, irked me about all of the people's responses in regard to this, as to why they wouldn't want option B. So I'm going to preface it by saying this. When you're in a relationship with someone, okay, you do not have some type of copyright, trademark, or true ownership over how that person feels. You are you are if that person feels strongly about you, that means you are the recipient of someone else's emotions, right? But you have no ownership even over that. That's something that's just separate. Okay. So what I think people oftentimes, whether subconsciously or consciously, they feel like they have rights over how other people feel. And to me, it's a sign of, to me personally, emotional. I just think it's a sign of that there can be more to grow and more to learn about the nature of relationships. Because how can, if a person liked you, right? Let's say someone organically met you and organically liked you. How can you be upset? Okay, no, don't get me wrong. I can understand how you can be upset if this happens. But how can you also at the same time not recognize that the same process by which they came to like you and have feelings for you and enter into a relationship with you, how in one breath can you be happy and accept that? But at the same time, if that process happens to happen for somebody else that's not you, and again, this is kind of a circumstantial thing. The person wasn't off looking for other relationships. How can you then like it when it happens for you, but then when it happens for someone else, the same thing, the same process, right? That they came to like you is happening for your partner, but just with someone else being the recipient, you are now saying that that's not allowed to happen. Like even that saying, and that's what some people are saying. Oh, that they're not allowed to do that. It's like it's some illusion of control. Like, what do you mean they're not
Mm-hmm.
allowed? Like clearly it happened. You don't have any control over this
Mm-hmm.
process, right? So, and I think that again, I understand people being upset. That's not kind of what I'm getting at. It's people's psychology towards it. Because yeah, of course, it hurts. We kind of are in some degrees like very selfish when it comes to that. We always want to be special. We always want the only thing that our partner feels to be for us and us only. And I also think that's why this leads into other type of thought patterns surrounding relationship where people like also don't want their partners to like have too many friends. They want them to spend all their time with them and other unhealthy and toxic ways to approach relationships. And I think it kind of devolves into that thinking kind of quickly. And this is why I'm so adverse to that reaction, because again, I'm going to say one more time, if they end up liking someone else, there definitely needs to be a conversation about, okay, where do we go from here? Because, do you want to explore that? What does that mean? Like, clearly you're coming to me, and depending upon how we consult about the matter, that will determine how we go from there. But as far as my own disposition towards what was happening inside of them, the process that happened inside of them that led them to like someone else, I'm not I'm not like, there's no part of me that's like angry or upset over that process happening, because I was happy. I was over the moon when that process happened and I was the recipient. But now that it's happening and I'm not the beneficiary, I all of a sudden and like feel some type of way about it. And I think that, it kind of speaks to here humans, we're kind of in this, especially in today's society, kind of bred to be selfish, and I think it's a bit evidence of that. So no one
Mm-hmm.
says you don't have the right to be upset, because it can be hurtful. To okay, something that you wanted to continue might not be continuing anymore because of how they feel for someone else. But be careful and examine, what you're actually being upset about, because just understand that even if you are upset that they start to grow feelings for someone else, also realize that process that you're upset over is the same reason why you're even in this point to begin with, because that process happened to you and you were grateful. So just be mindful of that. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about the situation. Why I would choose option B, because option B, again, the one where they come to me and say that they like someone else, it's more of the respectful one. Like they're still honoring our relationship in this sense by, hey, they recognize something that started to happen within them. They recognize, okay, this is starting to happening. Oh wow, I think I have feelings for someone else, or these feelings are strong enough to where like they're coming to my mind, and I think I need to talk to my person, the person I'm in a relationship. I think I want to speak about it with them. I want to consult them about it, right? And I can respect that, versus them kind of just going off and like acting on it. Again, that part is where it's like, okay, the option A is like they're just acting on their feelings without consulting me first, And to me, if like you consult with me first, whatever you're feeling, you're showing that I get to see evidence of you honoring and respecting our relationship, and that just kind of resonates with me more, and why I would choose option B. So yeah, so I'll go ahead and pass the rock over to Jason or Tim, whichever one of you want to go. Because Tim, I thought he was going to go ahead and like put the 3 up when I passed him the ball, but he went ahead and just passed it back to me. So I don't know if I want to pass it back to him or I want to give it to Jason, who's also waiting in the.
No. I mean, you got to honor the king. Like when LeBron passes it off, you give it back to him when he's ready. So Tim, please, if you're ready.
I like that analogy. No, I was listening to Armand. This is probably like to my recollections, maybe the third or fourth time Armand has brought this hypothetical up. And for those who don't know, Armand's like the hypothetical king. Just for kicks and giggles, he brings up hypotheticals, at any time of the day, no matter what we're doing, no matter what mood he's in. And it's just entertaining and oftentimes philosophical starter to a deep, meaningful conversation. Was interesting. So I was trying to listen to your interpretation, because I remember when you brought this up before, I had trouble trying to understand exactly the hypothetical context you were trying to frame this in. And I remember before I kept boiling it down to what I understood just to be emotional cheating versus physical cheating. But you're very specific in your hypothetical. The emotional cheating isn't just what I understand of emotional cheating as far as relates to option B. You clearly articulate how it just starts to develop feelings for someone else. You're key to repeat that. Whereas before I was thinking more of maybe a romantic position and the string of emotional processes that can lead to, you know, a deeply romantic exchange or physical exchange. And I think people carry different interpretations in their head on what's acceptable as far as where you're at emotionally with someone, you know, before you enter a very romantic context with that person. So I found that interesting listening to him just now. And, you know, when we decided this was going to be the focus, my first thought process was just to spend a lot of reflection on all of my romantic relationships to see if there were circumstances where um, there was thoughts or suspicions of cheating, you know, or cheating in general. And that brought me to recollections of exactly what factors and aspects of my life contributed to my understanding of cheating, you know, and just under that huge umbrella of cheating. And I've realized that according to this hypothetical, I probably would have a different answer before compared to what my answer would be now. And before it would have definitely been option A. As to now, you know, I know this is like a little cop out, but I believe both options would be troubling for me. So all I understood of cheating in my past is the imagery associated with it and with what feelings, you know, that triggered that imagery. You know, I don't know if it was primarily because I was raised by powerful women in my life, you know, or because my potential firsthand experiences pertaining to love, sex, and relationships was tempered by my value system or situational exposures. Situational exposures meaning like being inside all the time, you know, are primarily focused on sports and outside activities, you know. But I do know that most of the moments and times I could remember thinking or being a part of an experience that surrounds cheating amounted to simply how I felt about it, with just the base imagery of it. Whether I was watching TV or witnessing through video games, through friends, or from the books I read, you know, I internalized on the concept. I thought about it, you know, I conversed on it. You know, I even went through relationships through experience where suspicions surrounding cheating were present, but still, at the end of the day, I personally made sense of cheating through how I felt. That's it. Just the feelings. I knew it hurt. I knew it hurt as it relates to feelings of jealousy. I could probably write a 3-page poetry articulating how it felt, but never accurately, like realistically connecting the dots as to why. You know, it's the why behind something that could convey how much of a threat that something or somebody is or not to you. So yeah, I mean, with that being said, because I didn't understand the why back then and all I had was the imagery as my main biggest trigger, I would say that my girl essentially telling me she had sex with another guy definitely would have been more devastating to me back then versus her just telling me, you know, she's starting to develop feelings for it. That would have been my answer in the past. Now, fast forward today, you know, where my understanding of why people cheat has significantly expanded, then I could easily, I mean, real easily say that both scenarios would be equally, potentially very concerning because I now have a better understanding of the many factors and the many paths that could lead to cheating, you know. Um, so yeah, I mean, basically, you know, short, kick, sweet, that's my answer. I would, you know, today definitely, you know, definitely not. You know, both circumstances are indicative of a direction, you know, within and outside our relationship, marriage or no, where if we don't sit down and discuss it, could potentially end up in option A, you know? But, you know, just outside this hypothetical in general, you would want your partner to exercise option B with you. You know what I'm saying? At the very least, it opens up a discussion on where you and your partner are at that current moment in time, you know, and hopefully through that conversation, a lot of realistic factors, realities concerning you and your partner and what's going on internally and externally will become evident, and you'll continue on a more acceptable, satisfactory, healthy path between the two. But yeah, that's my answer. Neither. And you know, maybe later on in this episode, if there's time, this hypothetical in general reminded me of a lot of cool content from a psychotherapist I keep up with that I would share with the audience. But for now, go ahead and pass the ball to our co-host Jason.
Yes. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. In fact, yeah, some of those, it'd be interesting to see the professional view on cheating and how a therapist or a counselor would guide, say, a couple where infidelity was happening, and how a couple who wanted to still make the relationship work, how they would guide that. Because someone, it seems to me like the healing of, or the process of going through something like this requires a level of objectivity probably difficult for the couple to come to. So there you hire a professional to hold that level of kind of the fairness of it all. And then, two emotional people go about finding a balance between their ideas or their feelings or memories or whatever. So, this is a good question. I think this is I don't think we've done it just yet. Tim, typically you do, but we want to extend blessings, prayers, shouts out to all those in the 206 listening camp. Hopefully you're well and safe, healthy. We're thinking about humanity during these times. I think the conversation we're having today is at the crux, or not the crux, but one of the foundational thoughts about who we are as people. And that's about relationship and values or trust or commitments or following through on what we're about. So, option A or option B. Let me say this. My first thought is, if I'm in a relationship with someone, either one, option A or option B, the fact that a partner's coming to me says something. Okay, so my partner's coming to me with some trust. To me, that's like the best part of the whole scenario. The second best part of the scenario is that something's going to change in our relationship because of this being brought up, which I think is also good, because I think change, and I mean some kind of growth. Now, growth could be, okay, this is leading to the end of our relationship because maybe in the case of option B, that emotional connection strong enough, and that, my partner wants to go explore that. And just like our mom was bringing up, who am I? I don't have any say on this individual's life. So, okay, well, that's how that goes. Moving on. Or I'm telling you this because I would like to end that. And I feel the relationship between you and I needs to be focused on something to address this. Maybe I need some support somehow, or maybe, a variety of hypotheticals, as we like to do. The 206, here we are. We're asking a very simple question, option A or B. But of course, as you all know already,
Jason's going to give you option C.
I'm going to give you options. I mean, listen, no, I'm not going to give too many additional options, but because to me, option A and option B are really the same. It's the same thing. It doesn't really matter.
Yo, what's up, 206 audience and listeners? We apologize, but I think the technology gods were upset that I was criticizing them at the beginning of the episode. And so they decided to invoke their wrath upon us, and we got hit by the techno bug once again. So if you're listening to this now, there's probably a bit of an abrupt cutoff. where Jason was talking and now you hear me talking. That's the point where we started to experience technical difficulties. So we decided to, the next day, today's today, we did some other things that make us think that we're good to go. So we're going to pick up the conversation where we left off. We thought we maybe would kind of start at a certain point. So maybe Jason won't exactly transition perfectly into, maybe Jason won't exactly continue the exact flow of what he was saying, but we think he's going to touch on some of the things that he already said and maybe try to continue that same a thought. We just know that some of the things we want to touch on as the episode continues is pretty much why people, because obviously this option A, option B is all talking about cheating, right? So we're going to talk about people's perspective towards cheating, what technically is cheating, even like if we all agree on what the definition of cheating is, why it's a deal breaker for some people as opposed as not being a deal breaker to others, and some of our personal experiences with cheating. So that being said, I believe the last thing Jason was saying before he got cut off was that both options are kind of the same to him. And I remember that I asked him today, like, hey, maybe you can talk about why you think both options are the same, but also I can play devil's advocate and ask you, because you said it's not that deep to you, like it's not an automatic breakup to you. And if that's the case, then, what is something that's automatically an offense that you will break up with your partner? And why not just be in an open relationship if you're not going to be upset, or if you're not going to end the relationship if your partner cheats? So with that, I pass the rock over to Jason.
Word. Yeah, good. Thanks for the reminder there. Yeah, I know it's same recording, but what's up, everyone, again? So how these two options were the same to me, I guess, had to do with the idea that yes, neither one is not interest. What's the word? Like preferable. Ideally, they're not situations we have to encounter. Yet, in the end, if it was like this one or that one, to me they're the same in that way, because they're both kind of eliciting kind of like some sort of unpleasantness for us, probably in our emotion for the most part. Yet there's also a redeeming factor in the whole bit, which has to do with the kind of coming out and saying, hey, this is how I'm feeling, or this is what happened. There's a level of like, trying to rebuild some communication there, or at least maybe just clear the air there. Maybe it's all still a selfish thing by the partner who's just making their own choices. Yet and still, I think the fact that it comes to our awareness and we're having the conversation, to me, is what's important, right? So what was happening between the people, what one did think the relationship stood for, now maybe these things really need to get revisited. So with that being said, kind of like the train of thought I was wanting to express was, if we're about our partner, if we're really about it. Now this all this kind of thing might be predicated on how deep you're in the relationship with your partner, right? And then these things show up. So
How
assuming this
strong
is
the
your,
relationship is to begin. Because if this is just like
yeah, right.
another thing on top of another thing, then it's like, okay, like, but if everything's great in your relationship and then this happens, I think it's a bit different.
It does. The timing of it is crucial, I think, to the attitude of it, because at least for me, because the fact, like, say it's my partner, mother of my children, we're 15 years down the road, man, I tell you, man, I don't know if she could say anything about infidelity that I would then say to myself, well, now that's a wrap. Maybe, but I don't know. Like, what's the worst thing you can think? Like, I don't know, man. We could throw out any hypothetical uncomfortable situation, and I'm sure there's a few I would be like, yeah, no, let's not, let's not do that. But the point is, I'm trying to say is like, going down the road deep with someone and you're building a family, raising kids, it could be that much more sensitive and therefore that much more hurtful. And perhaps that's why I think many cases of infidelity lead to a breakup. I think has to do with that. At the same time, if people are growing together, listen, I'll tell you this. If I'm in a relationship for 15 years, I would hope I would have a strong sense of my partner, right? And like, we would have gone through enough things to kind of be able to talk about whatever, and also and preemptively go about solving potentially challenging situations, right? Because both situations, like with option A and B, are both they're both avoidable. As much as option A, which is the physical infidelity, it's clearly avoidable. It takes a lot for physicality to come into play. A lot of choices have to be made before all that. Again, there's cases and circumstances, that someone might be able to, speak on, of course, nuanced ones. But it's very hard to argue about, like, oh, I didn't know. I got out of hand. And, I mean, again, choices, physicality, you're moving your body. The emotional one, though, is a little different in that we're saying, well, I didn't have a choice. I was there. This person and I had to interact. The way we interact with people is very much a choice. So if someone is interested in engaging somebody for their comfort or the flirtation or whatever, then that's going to offer and invite all kinds of other things. So my sense is they're the same because they both have to do with the partner and where they're at in their particular feelings about the relationship, which is good information, I think, for any relationship. So I would hope that this actually situation like this would happen a little sooner than, say, 15 years. But yeah, probably not within the first few weeks or a few months. It's a little too sensitive for it to, I think at some point we use this analogy of like a garden. So if you're building something with your partner, it's like, imagine cultivating like a very large garden in which you had very different kinds of fruits and vegetables and flowers and things. Maybe you had something like 50 variety of different fruits and vegetables and flowers and herbs. And so if you had this huge variety and, you're sharing this garden with your partner here, and then your partner decides to like burn a third of the garden, just straight up burns it. Third of the garden disappears. 20 or so varieties of what you have there just is gone. It's like, wow, that's pretty devastating. That might be worth, what the hell with this whole garden thing anyway. Let's just shut it down, and I'll just go build a new garden with a farmer who I can trust or something. Right? Yeah, you can go do that. You could also just be like, hey, what happened? You burnt this down. Like, was this premeditated? Was this like an accident? Like, what's going on? Like, do we want to keep this garden? Do we want to replant something here? Like, let's talk about it, So I'm seeing it that way. So option A and B, it's really just like, let's talk about it. Like, so for me, the choice is just like, what part of the garden do you want to get burned? Do you want that part or this part? Or it's kind of like, well, it doesn't really matter. In the end, we got to address the fact that someone's putting fire to the garden. That's the thing that needs to get addressed. What part of it is maybe preferential? So for me, I'm trying to move past the preferences. It's like, none of it's preferential. So I'm not going to choose the lesser of two evils. I'm just like, it's the same thing in the end. So that's also why, going back to this idea of devil's advocate comment, and I'll leave it at this, there are all kinds of things that would hinder a relationship from growing. So I think when choosing a partner, it's not so much as like, well, I'm going to accept all of my partner's shortcomings, so therefore I'm willing to accept any kind of behavior and repeated behavior. It's not that at all. It can't be that. That wouldn't be fair to the relationship from the beginning, which is about growth and support. So what it would be about would be more so, all things are worth consulting upon, and perhaps we can reconcile. All things are reconcilable. I'm not suggesting that it would be carried out that way, though, because so many factors can influence this stuff. And, so maybe I'll leave it at that for now, more in the theory realm, because if we go into the hypotheticals, we could say things like hurting children and hurting big groups of people or something. Those things seem pretty intense. At least I would have to process that somehow. And I couldn't really imagine it, because every time I think about relationships, I imagine like the partners hurting each other mostly, not really, maybe again, you hear about someone hurting a family member, etc. But, it's those rare cases where, you pick someone who turns out to be a monster. I mean, maybe it's not rare. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't say that. But in my cases, I just, the relationships I've had, they just were personality differences in the end. And I hadn't been a part of a relationship that included infidelity, that I know of, but probably. I mean, if you're talking about emotional infidelity, man, I have a lot of people in my life that I connect with. So, I think it goes back more and more to what we've always been talking about with the 206, and that's the communication, continuing to communicate with each other, including in the things maybe we don't really find too pleasant to communicate about, especially if it impacts the actual relationship we're in. I think it's going to have to be spoken on at some point. So yeah, maybe I can leave it at that. Maybe you wanted to add something to that, Armand.
Yeah, for sure. I have some thoughts on the matter as well, but I wanted to let Tim jump in on the conversation because I think he might have mentioned it in the first part before we started to have technical issues about something he listened to from Esther Perel that he wanted to add to the conversation. So I'll go ahead and let him do that before I give some more of my thoughts on what you said. And I also have personal experience in regard to, like, air quotes, emotional infidelity that I can share.
Right on.
Awesome. Yeah. So, some things of note I've noticed in what you just said. It reminds me of how I used to understand a lot of things about relationships, romance or not. And many times in relation to infidelity, we are so used to conceptualizing, visualizing, and understanding many things around a relationship in a very black and white sense. We have imagery in our head that pops up when it comes to cheating, saying what that looks like. We also articulate and describe our relationships in terms of loyalty, in terms of strength, in terms of deepness. And it was only in the last 5 years since I've been sick at home with lots of time on my hands and me delving into a whole bunch of podcasts, books, and YouTube videos did my mind and understanding expand in relation to the reality and the root causes of a lot of these relationship issues. Obviously, cheating being one of them. And one of the biggest influential content that I've bumped into in the last 5 years has been in the form of a 60-something-year-old woman. Her name is Esther Perel. She was first brought up from a friend of mine that I met through Armand and his older brother. She had been listening to this 60-year-old woman's podcast for a good amount of time. And ever since she suggested us diving into it, I've been on her ever since. So this woman is named Esther Perel. She's been a psychotherapist for 30 plus years. She's the daughter of a Holocaust survivors, and she has just countless content outside her professional work within her therapy office, in the form of TED Talks, podcast, television interviews, best-selling books. Amongst her most notable focuses in her work is the concept of erotic intelligence, and her noting of the contradiction of modern marriage. Where on one side you have one partner, we want one partner to offer stability, things like safety, predictability, dependability. And at the same time, we want that same person to supply us with awe and mystery and adventure and risk. And this woman advocates for a more open and honest discussion of monogamy as it relates to what she terms as the erotic and the domestic. She's always, in a lot of her interviews or talks, explaining how today's modern marriage is essentially impossible. She always describes it as the impossibility, of today's marriage. And she says it's impossible in reality because we're essentially demanding and expecting everything from one person what used to take an entire village to supply. And which I always thought was fascinating. So I wanted to share with our listeners here a piece from a podcast that I've been listening to for a while now, and then another piece from a separate podcast in which she's interviewed. But the work I'm most familiar with in regards to her is a podcast titled "Where Do I Begin?", which brings listeners in actually inside her therapy office to listen in on her counseling sessions. It's very captivating, it's mind opening, and it demonstrates accurately what's really going on in these marriages. So, but in a separate podcast titled "The Ticket: Politics from the Atlantic," you can listen to this on Spotify. Esther is interviewed on the exploration around why do happy people cheat, which I thought was very interesting. We think of cheating and infidelity in terms of already toxic and bad relationships. Like we imagine that the relationship had already been in shambles long before the major breakup occurred or boiling point as it surrounds infidelity. But in her research, she's been finding that's not true. She's been finding that infidelity happens in a lot of happy marriages as well, which I thought was interesting. So during this episode, one of the hosts asked her, what makes marriages difficult today? What makes it so difficult today? And she says that many affairs have nothing to do with the relationship, that they were a deficiency. And often people in good marriages have affairs, that when you do marry, you often inhabit a certain version of yourself. Certain parts of you become the dominant parts that live that story, that life. And often you curtail many other parts of you. And often you become a much narrower version of yourself. It's really not the fault of the marriage. It's just the way that life unfolds. And so the host afterwards asked her, can you give me an example from one of the couples you work with? I want to understand how this narrowing manifests itself. And this is how she responds. I thought this was interesting. So she gives an example. She says, so imagine I'm a person, man or woman, gay or straight, who was interested in, say, literature. I wanted to be a writer. I have traveled. I was an adventurer and curious person, but I grew up in a family in which I had an alcoholic brother. My father ended up not being able to support us. My mother needed me. I became a responsible caregiver to the entire family. And then eventually I marry. I continue that same role. And I have been holding up the shoulders, everyone's shoulders up so that everyone else can rest on me. I am the provider. I am the caretaker. I am the organizer. And this is when the host interrupts and says, wow, I feel really sorry for this person. And she's like, yeah. She says, this can be any person. That part of me that used to like open-endedness, that was into exploration and discovery, all of that has essentially been squashed. And because I had to carry all that. And she tells the host that this is a classic example where you begin to see that people who have affairs are not simply irresponsible. They are often people who are crumbling under the weight of responsibility and for the first time experience something that's just for them. And she reiterates, she's not justifying, cheating or the behavior or condoning it. She's reinstating that it's very important. And she refers to one of her books she had written, which is titled State of Affairs, Rethinking Infidelity. She simply explains that this information, this research, this discovery that she's been finding about infidelity as it relates to happy marriages in that book, just simply that this is trying to understand it, trying to analyze what's been going on. But the narrative, she says, when she listens to her clients, when their clients say that I feel dead, which is very powerful. And she begins to listen to, people worldwide. And she recognizes that the one word that people use to describe how they feel when they have an affair, and that word has nothing to do with sex and excitement, is simply, I felt alive. And she says, because of this power transgression and transgressing my own rules, my own lines, my own barriers, the confines of my life, She explains that they explain that this is what gives me a burst of energy, autonomy, freedom, aliveness. And she says that this is probably one of the most existential themes that keeps coming up in those particular kind of affairs, that happen to be these relationships happen to be at first perfectly satisfying, loving, caring relationships. So essentially what she is saying is that the way we think about our relationships today, especially as it relates to the old traditions of marriage, monogamous marriage, obviously needs to be reanalyzed and rethought, because a lot of what goes down in our relationships, infidelity or no, happens on a very nuanced level. And this is going based off my memory. In a TED Talk, she once said that we come into this world with two sets of fundamental wants and needs, right? One of them being associated with stability, security, safety, dependability, predictability, sense of belongingness, togetherness, while the other set involves adventure, novelty, mystery, exploration, freedom. And that because we really don't live and make sense of our relationships every day on that nuanced level, we have no idea what the actual root causes of what's going on and the many problems within a relationship, romantic relationship, and those involving cheating. So I thought that was very interesting. And I want to share 2 statistics, which we'll leave a link down below. One is according to an issue of Marriage and Divorce Journal that states that 70% of all Americans will engage in some kind of affair in their marital lifetime. Another one, according to infidelity statistics, says that 40% of unmarried and 25% of married couples will at least one time in their marital lifetime engage in one affair, which I thought was fascinating. So really, like in many episodes we talked about in the past as relates to other topics, you'll hear us repeat, especially in future episodes, that it's very important that amongst the many changes that needs to be implemented in our time for future generations, one of them is changing our conversation about these things so we can properly be able to recognize and identify, a lot of the not just personal factors surrounding psychology and who you are, but also analyzing actual external and situational factors that influence what's going on in our relationship.
True that. Yeah, that's a lot of good stuff. And yeah, definitely we'll make sure we'll leave the links in the description for you guys to go look that up on your own time. So I just have some thoughts surrounding things that both of you guys said and some other things I was thinking about yesterday after after we were experiencing our technical difficulties. I was just contemplating about this some more, and I just knew there were certain things I wanted to say. So I'm going to do my best to kind of just like address what you guys both just said, and some things I just wanted to get off my chest. So Tim just gave a lot of statistics. Jason just shared what he shared, and I also have, maybe I'll start with the personal experience that happened to me, or is more of an air quotes option B, right? Long story short, I was in a relationship with a girl. Let's just say I was well into adulthood, and she told me that her ex-boyfriend, a guy that she kind of had one of those first love, on again, off again for a number of years, I think it was close to 10 years on again, off again relationship with him, had messaged her, hit her up, whatever. And I don't recall exactly if he was like hitting her up in that way, or just the mere fact that he was messaging her again made her start to think about the possibility of him and her. But she brought it up to me. Now, at the end of the day, whether it's option A, option B, or you're living outside that hypothetical, although I think it's important not to approach these things from a mental disposition that's binary, I either have to do this or I either have to do that. I either have to do this or I either have to do that. At the end of the day, kind of when you're in a relationship and you're faced with whatever difficulty you're faced with, your option really is just to continue to persevere through the hardships and the challenges and the struggles that every relationship inevitably has. Or you decide to end the relationship or change the nature of the relationship to some degree. There's really only two options in that, from that perspective. So when it came to what happened with her, I think for me, and I think I mentioned this in the last episode about, what was our last episode? I just had the biggest brain fart of my life. The last episode of, Old Flames, right? For me, I'm so process oriented when it comes to my relationships because you don't, like I said, you don't truly know which relationship is going to last until, it lasts and you're on your deathbed and that's your partner. So I'm so much less concerned with the being fixated on the outcome of any specific relationship as I am then trusting the process and not doing anything to compromise the integrity of relationship building and character investigation. So for me, that's always what I'm focused on, and to me, it allows you to be detached, and it gives you very clear insight to how to approach certain situations. At least for myself, speaking for myself. And with her, I'm like, okay, like, did it feel great? No, I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm so happy. I'm just jumping for joy that this girl is like talking to her ex or is having thoughts about her ex-boyfriend, right? It strikes some chord within us that, invokes jealousy or, anger, whatever it may be, that then wants you to maybe end the relationship, right? So some of those emotions were present, but a stronger emotion superseded those emotions, and that was, okay, how do I best respond to this situation to show this person that I care about them? I'm here to be supportive, and at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out things together and grow together, right? She came to me and was honest and transparent with me and was sharing this with me. And that's acting in good faith. So I'm going to act in good faith and put my best foot forward. So we ended up talking about it and we decided to continue on in the relationship, and the relationship ended. I think that, there were certain things about the relationship that's going to make it end anyways. But in that moment in time, again, just being like, oh man, being upset and saying, you know what, she's starting to like someone else, forget it. Let me just end the relationship. It didn't really resonate with me. Okay. And again, if other people, that's how you operate, then that's fine. I'm not here to, dictate how other people should respond to these situations. I'm just here to share my perspective on the matter and say how I like to go about these situations. So that's what kind of happened with her. And I think that, talking about cheating in general, right? We all know the statistics. Tim, you just threw out some of them. Jason, you and I talk about it all the time. Not only do we know about the divorce rate, but also forget the divorce rate. How many of those relationships that don't technically fall into that divorce rate where people are air quotes together, but they're only in it for the kids and they're not necessarily happy, or one of them is cheating or acting out on one of them is cheating and the other one doesn't know, and then so is the relationship really working, or people are just generally unhappy together, but they stay together for whatever reason, whether it be insecurities or financial stability, whatever it may be, right? So then you have a higher percentage of non-functioning relationships. So then how many relationships do you truly see, and I mean honestly and truly see, where each person makes the other person better and they're better people because they're in a relationship with someone else that truly helps them grow? I think that's rare to see, and there's a myriad of factors because of that. But I think that ultimately, when we're in these relationships, if we focus less on, like, in a situation where maybe, like, let me backtrack a little bit, because some people say categorically, no matter what, cheating is a no deal. If you cheat, I'm gone, right? And I respect that. That's kind of how I naturally think about it as well. Like, my first inclination is like, shit, well, you're gonna cheat, then what's the point, right? That is my first inclination. But I've always lived my life where, like, I'm going to think and reflect about my initial gut reaction and inclinations about certain things to see if there's a deeper, more profound perspective I may come to find through reflection, right? So for me, it's like, yeah, I've kind of grown past that gut inclination of peace, and excuse me. And it's like, okay, so I can do that, but what are some other things that people just accept in relationships that they don't categorically say, no, it's a deal breaker and I'm going to stay? Because at the end of the day, whether it's cheating or X or Y or Z, there's plenty of things that can end relationships. And I started to not isolate cheating as something that's so much different than everything else. and just look at it like, you always have a decision. A relationship cannot be functioning under the understanding that the relationship was entered into, right? So I think most people, unless you're in a clearly open relationship, right, it's like not even something that has to be talked about. Unless you're in a clearly open relationship, it's tacitly understood that cheating's a no-go, right? So, but there's other things, right? Like people cannot consult properly. They can get in really volatile, hostile arguments and disagreements that are just unhealthy and toxic. People can do plenty of other things within a relationship that don't really help a relationship function, but people won't respond necessarily the same way when it comes to cheating. Like if someone was to cheat, they would just immediately say, "Oh no," it affects them differently than maybe other things. So for me personally, I just think that, again, I'm out here. I'm going to say this. I'm an idealist of sorts, right? Like I 100% believe that monogamy is possible, that you can have a healthy and beautiful relationship without anybody stepping out and cheating on the other. And I think it's more than possible. And I just want to say that I don't want to sound like I'm condoning cheating or making excuses for it. Not doing that whatsoever. I just think that, like most things in life, we kind of have to change our perspective in the way we think about things. Because, I mean, again, I think the proof is in the pudding. Like there was something I was listening to on YouTube the other day. Is like, if you do what you always do, you're going to get what you always get. And if we all kind of have these same general attitudes towards relationships and things that, if we all have the same general attitudes and behavior towards relationships, I think we're going to get what we always get, which is, the statistics, right? So for me, I'll just say that, I mean, I shared my personal experience. That's how I felt about that. And I think that I don't isolate cheating anymore. Again, it really depends upon like whether or not, like I know in the hypothetical option A or option B, I chose option B as which one was more preferable if I had to pick one. But living kind of outside the hypothetical, I don't think that I can say that if either happened, and technically, again, both have happened to me in my life, that I would automatically just like, oh, I'm done, right? The relationship's over. Like, I can't confidently say that. I know that for sure. I think in some of these cases, if it were to happen to me, I would in the relationship, depending upon how things shook out. But it's not an automatic for me. It's okay. Let's talk about this and let's see how I feel about this. Let's see what comes from consultation, right? And I think it depends on so many different factors. Again, the timing of when it happened, how long we were together, how healthy was the relationship up to this point, whether or not I decide to end the relationship and go our separate ways with the person. So yeah, I think I said most of what I wanted to say. And I think there was something else. Nope, I can't remember. I was going to ask Jason another question because he said something, I think, before we started recording, but it slipped my mind. So
Well,
if either one of you had something to add, but go ahead.
yeah, I wanted to just jump in on what you're speaking on because, and also what Tim brought up, and like we all have been speaking on this in the 206, reframing the conversation, framing our point of reference as well is imperative for us moving forward. And I think the statistics are staggering if we really think about some of those statistics that Tim shared. It's like
Ridiculous.
yeah, it's ridiculous. It's wow. Like I was genuinely shocked at that, but not shocked at the same time in that we don't really have conversations that make us uncomfortable. And the fact is our society, we have used sex in so many ways. It's highly charged in the fabric of our society, right? So there's a big emphasis on it. There's a big emphasis on attraction and concepts of beauty and objectification. There's so much around marketing and consumerism that deals with that. There even kind of the willingness to think to myself, well, on both levels, you know what? If someone cheats on me, the hell with them. And then also the same thought of the hell with my partner, I'm gonna cheat on them. It's kind of it's kind of wild. Either way you look at it, but it's common. So we're gonna need to change the way we speak about it, and maybe even just start conversating on the things we don't talk about. So my sense is what I heard you say to Armand and what Esther Perel is saying is let's get real about it. Let's look at it for what it is and then move through it. Because my sense too, and I don't know what Esther Perel would say and what her experience shows, would probably some of the most successful relationships are the ones who've gotten through cases of infidelity, because not so
Because
much.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the question. I think when it boils down to it is like, is a single act of someone cheating on someone else, obviously, and it causes a huge emotional distress. That's very clear. But does the act itself prevent the relationship from growing and moving forward? In so much as the only thing that technically prevents it is the person, the afflicted party, of getting over the betrayal that the person,
That's it.
that the partner inflicted upon them, right? Because outside of that, especially if it's not becomes a pattern of behavior, again, I'm about patterns of behavior more so than anything, right? If anything starts to become a pattern, then it's clear. It's like, you know what? I'm not going to really participate in this process anymore because you've shown a pattern of behavior that's not conducive to our relationship working, whether that be with cheating or anything else, right? But let's say someone cheats on you, right? And that person, I think sometimes people cheat and like they don't even want the relationship to work out anymore. They get caught in like, oh, whatever, right? Like
Sure.
the other person's not even interested in continuing it. But let's say someone cheats, they show true contrition and they are actually upset about about the pain they inflicted upon their partner, and they want to work towards reconciliation, right? What about the act of cheating, again, other than the other person getting over the emotional distress that was inflicted upon them, actually prevents the relationship from continuing and moving forward, right? Because to me, there's other things that people can do, whether it's singular or a pattern of behavior, that are actually could be harder for things to move forward. I mean, I'm just going to give you, this is my personal opinion. This is Armand, right? Things may look differently for you, but I'm sure there might be certain deal breakers for everyone else that may be deeper than cheating. For me, if you don't know how to, when you're upset or angry or stressed, if you don't know how to still communicate through that in a way to which we can still go about our lives, and you being stressed and upset or angry, whatever it may be, doesn't compound itself because then you're unable to properly communicate when you're in that state of being, that's a deal breaker for me. Because communication to me is one of the most important things in a relationship. And
Yeah.
if it's like, I use this analogy all the time. Sometimes, who likes being sick, right? Nobody likes being sick. No one's like,
Right.
oh yeah, please give me the flu, give me COVID-19, let me get cancer, right? But let's break it down to something very small. Like, let's say you have a cold, right? No one wants to have a cold, right? So everyone's obviously going to be affected by the mood might be affected by having a cold, right? But then there's some people, because they are sick and they don't know how to handle being sick and they don't like being sick, they compound the problem by then having a worse attitude. It's like they're upset about being sick and that makes them upset. And then it's worse, right? They can't just have a cold and go through it, right? It's like, oh crap, I have a cold, man, and then everything's thrown off, right? That's something that is like a no-fly zone for me. I personally don't like to deal with it. I like people who are able to stand firm in adversity. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm looking for someone's perfect and can't ever be affected by anything. I'm talking about a clear disposition and a clear behavior attitude towards being in conflict and being distressed. And if you handle it very poorly, I'm out the door, because to me, it's inevitable that life is going to throw hardships your way, that you're going to have trials and tribulations that you have to overcome. And if you're not suited for those, then it's almost like, how are we going to get through this situation? It's almost like, if a relationship, you're getting thrown out in the ocean, right? And it's like people can like swim good enough to just swim, but like when a wave comes, they just start to drown. It's like, well, we know we're going to have waves. So like, you got to learn how to swim here, right?
Yeah.
So for me, if I was in a relationship and a girl starts to show a clear pattern of behavior where she doesn't deal with stress well, and it's hard to communicate with her, and I would be much more likely to end that relationship as opposed to, like, let's say she just cheated on me one time. Again, it depends, right? Like, I'm not saying I'm
Right.
automatically going to be with her, because I'm not. Again, it all depends on the context, right? My inclination is always that I probably would break up with them, but I'm telling you, I'm much more likely to automatically be, I'm done with this, more so than cheating. It's almost like I don't want to have a conversation about the other one because I can't even have a conversation about it because you might be stressed out and you don't know how to have a communication. You don't know how to communicate when that happens. So,
Well, let me
yeah.
jump in on that note and mention how it goes back to the emotion, right? If the same person who couldn't have the conversation about the stress, and again, that can be learned. It's all relative to partnership and styles of communication and whatever. I understand where you're coming from, because especially, if we don't feel like we're on the same page, I think is what we're talking about. And in a certain way. And if we're not really feeling connected with our partner, we're missing a mark in whatever facet, whether it's like on a mental, intellectual connection or an emotional connection or a physical connection. Perhaps the social and spiritual connections come into play equally. My sense is it's more about getting in sync with that. And if we're not in sync with those various facets of life with our partners, it's liable to be difficult. Now, again, people can change, maybe. um, it would be nice if people could change. Yet, I think what's most important for us in when we think about any of these things is what kind of person am I going to be? How am I going to move through the world? Because I don't have control over anybody and my partners, and that's kind of also why my sense is it's a difficult thing to approach, because we're not maybe asking ourselves about other questions about life. We're maybe content with a very simple way of moving through the world, perhaps, where not much is happening for us other than survival. Yet, everyone on some way is making their way through. They have some time here, so it's very uh, it's very case by case in a lot of ways, even per relationship, and so many variables come into these things. And I think, well, what I think we're saying is let's look at more of those variables, and maybe even ones that our partner wouldn't necessarily know about, or speak on too, because we could just see influences of society or subconscious kind of dynamics that we see in each other, right? I'm a certain kind of person, born and raised in a certain place. I'm going to bring some unawareness into places I go with people who have awareness, and they can inform me. You know what I'm saying? So we might have to also be proactive in just working on togetherness, right? Working on building something positive rather than working on finding, avoiding the things we don't like, right? Or hoping the things we don't like happen. Let's actually maybe use some of that energy more proactively. And one final note, which is a little more provocative, perhaps, with cheating, physical cheating or emotional cheating. The reason why I think society, again, everyone's gonna have to make their own way, but I sometimes feel cheating is the reason we break up a lot, is because it's actually, again, it's another act of war. Meaning to say this, because cheating ostensibly is something loving, right? Between at least the two people in the moment, right? Yeah, someone is being cheated on, it's terrible for them, but those two people are enjoying themselves quite nicely. So that's a very
Bro, there's going
powerful.
to be a lot of people you trigger with that statement.
Also, it's provocative, and that's okay. So that's a loving moment right there. I think because in our society, in our world, and where we're at, we war so much. We're always ready to fight, have a negative comment, have a negative thought. To me, it's just manifestation of the condition of humanity. So we war, we destroy that relationship. Oh, they showed that love right there. Like, oh, that's not mine. It's like nations go to war for resources that are plentiful for both nations and beyond. But for some reason, they think there's scarcity. So I'm not trying to say that in a mode of monogamy or partnership, this is, like resources in the planet. What I'm trying to say is when there is love, you can get through these things. Like
Yeah.
it need not be, love need not be the reason to break up something else. It just might be what needs to be put in to the scenario in the first place, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
that's also what people are seeking. So I'll leave it at that.
I'm going to say one last thing, and I'll leave it as my final thought, and then Tim can go ahead and give his final thought, and then we can wrap up the show. I'll say this, and I'm going to bring up something that I don't think we've touched upon yet. And again, I'm gonna say this is part of my last final statements as well. No way am I condoning cheating or trying to mitigate how hurtful it can be to those who have been cheated on, and how many families it potentially has broken up. Not potentially has broken up. I've never cheated on my partner. I never plan on it. We're just simply trying to offer a different perspective. And so, with that being said, I'm gonna say this: we haven't talked about forgiveness yet, and that's obviously, like, if a relationship is going to continue after someone's been cheating on, forgiveness is it has to be there. I don't think you can truly move on and grow from the moment unless you truly forgive your partner. And it requires a lot of courage and a lot of strength and a lot of trust and faith, which was not being exhibited to you because, if someone has cheating on you, they haven't really shown you the amount of loyalty and trust that you're about to give to them. But I'll just say this. And I think this applies for a lot of things, but more, especially for forgiveness. It's not forgiveness if it's easy. If it's like takes nothing for you to really forgive someone, then, what does that really even mean? To me, it's really only forgiveness if you have to overcome a lot of emotion, pain, and hurt in order to do so. You're not obligated to do so whatsoever. I'm just saying that that's what's required. And I think that concepts like forgiveness, concepts like things, and I think in a Western society that don't benefit us in any way, shape, or form, and we can't see the direct positive impact it has in our life, we kind of like, oh, what's the point of that? No, I don't agree. Like, I think our gut reaction is to not agree with it, right? But forgiveness is a virtue, and I think it's something we all can learn more about, including myself. And I think there's something beautiful about forgiveness being a part of relationship, and forgiveness sometimes being a pivotal point in a relationship that truly allows a relationship to flourish. And you very well may forgive the person, and you might be bit by it again. You could honestly forgive someone and they may cheat on you again, and then you might decide to break up with them, and you might feel like an idiot for forgiving them. You're like, oh, why did I give them another chance? But at the same time, I think you still did learn something, because I think when you exercise certain virtues and principles, there is no reward other than you, to me, living in the closest form to the true nature of the human condition that we're supposed to, and that's the reward in and of itself. There's no observable, tangible benefit. Like you say, oh, I went to school for 4 years and got a degree. I clocked in my 40 hours of work and I got this paycheck, right? It's not one of those things. It's one of those things that helps you become a more evolved and mature person. And I think that we have an opportunity to allow ourselves that benefit and also extending a virtue to someone else that can help them. And I think that's a tricky thing about forgiveness, because you never know if it's going to, air quotes, work out. You never know if your forgiveness is going to be taken for granted, a throwback in your face, or ultimately, someone just does what they did the first time that you forgave them for again, right? But is forgiveness still worth giving? Because if you only forgave people forgave people with the foresight that you were 100% sure that you would never be hurt again, then again, is that forgiveness? I don't know. Those are just some of my thoughts, and I think that's something to contemplate when we think about cheating. And with that, I pass the rock over to Tim to give some of his final thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. Forgiveness enables, or what I say, puts up the probability of a second chance or another chance at reconciliation just way up. So the practice of forgiving really gives you many opportunities to have that stability between you and your partner, to grow and to talk about whatever's going on between you two. It also relaxes our biological defense mechanism as it relates to emotions. Fear is an old ass defense mechanism in order for human being to survive. It's outdated, but it's still with us, and it rules our every conflict resolution and reaction and reflex and our problems, big and small, in this day and age. For me, in the last few years, as I learned more about how we tick and a lot of the social factors like American values surrounding secularization, individualism, perfectibility, meritocracy, all of this is influencing our relationships. And before, several years ago, because I was unaware of this, my reactions and reflexes only amounted to anger to the old system. You know what I'm saying? Jealousy, maybe beat around the bush manipulation, fall back on so many things that don't address the real issues of what's going on in these conflicts. And these issues repeat themselves in a cycle over and over again. The whole quote, knowledge is power. There's probably one of the greatest lessons I've been learning in my personal life last few years is that the more I learn, the easier it is for me to emotionally regulate myself and others, which falls into emotional intelligence. But we got to understand as animals, what I'm saying, before there was laws, before there was school, before there was written language, most of our human history went down, largely throughout most of our existence without language, without law, without rules, without our ability to really conceptualize things and stuff like that. That's a long ass time as far as evolution is concerned to go without, these abstract concepts that we know today. For me, that just really is liberating. It relinquishes all the frustration I have in relation to just a lot of the ailments and inequalities and instabilities we go through, big and small, today. The fact that people grow also is something we need to keep in mind. We're always growing, we're always changing, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Just because you hold traditional norms and a title over your head, like marriage, doesn't mean that process just stops.
Yeah.
We have to understand that as well. So in regards to awareness, in regards to social norms, what social factors influence us, how we tick, as human beings, and just facts like, the fact that we grow, our mind like that. And these are things we need to keep in consideration as we grow ourselves individually in our day and age, but also set a precedent, set a foundation for our children, our future generations to come. But yes, this has been an exciting conversation. As always work on improving the way you communicate. Whatever moments you have to incorporate reflection and internalization is super important. And to understand that most of what happens in your life shouldn't be chalked up to how bad or good someone is or their personality or psychology. There are a kick ton of external and situational factors that have to be considered in understanding what's actually going on. So much love and peace from Tampa, Florida. As always, Big Tim. Love, safety, and good health to everyone in these hard times. And thanks for listening to us today.
Yeah. And I'll just say, like I promised in the beginning of the episode, the next thing you hear from us, the next episode, will be the spirituality and religion episode. With that being said, thank you for tuning into today's episode and listening to us give our perspective in regard to what cheating is not, how we would respond in these hypothetical situations. Just know that was our attempt at giving some thought and perspective to a very nuanced and complicated subject. That being said, we'll catch you guys next time. Until then, be easy. Peace out.
All right, guys. Deuces.